Even when I was on the world team, 2 years before the Olympics, with ice skating, you just never know that you're going to make it. And even then, I thought, well, gee, I hope I make the Olympic team in 1976. There was never any thought that, yes, I'm going to make the team, and yeah, I could win a medal. You know, deep down inside, I knew that if I worked really hard and if I skated my best, I had a really good shot at making the team, and I had a really good shot at winning a medal. And this is when I was already #2 in the world. So, you know, I was never that confident, but I knew if I did all the right things, I had a shot at it. Usually go into the bathroom and throw up. I really would get violently ill. So I never ate very much before I competed because I couldn't keep it down. And I often thought it was really like going to your own execution. You know, from the time I got up in the morning, you know, I'd be looking at the clock saying, okay, I've only got 12 hours until I'll be finished, and then 9 hours till I'm finished, and 5 minutes from now I'll be finished. It was just, I couldn't wait till it was over. But once I got onto the ice, and once the music started, after about 30 seconds, I was okay. But it's just that first 30 seconds, which is why, you know, I would always do, you know, one of those easy jumps that kind of, you didn't have to really worry about maybe missing it. And then the next couple of jumps were always the tough ones, because you're still, you know, full of energy before you get exhausted at the end of the program. I had always had self-doubt, still do. Fear of failure, not really. Didn't matter. I mean, we all say this, but it's true. You know, you just want to go out and skate well. I just never wanted to embarrass myself. You know, it's just, it didn't matter if I won or not. You know, you hope that your best is better than everybody else's best. But, you know, you're out there. I was always out there competing against myself. Because there were so many more skaters that were much more talented than I think the reason I won the Olympics was sheer perseverance, not because I was certainly not more talented than anybody else. You know, I worked as hard as I could. I always thought, you know, I was always the first one on the ice and the last one off. And I'm just one of those people that has to be overtrained and overworked before I can do my best. And that's unlike a lot of my friends and colleagues today. But so, you know, it was just sheer perseverance. I was not the most talented. Still am not the most talented. It's just whatever I've done has just come through hard work, really, and the love of it and the passion for it. There were 3 of us that sort of played musical chairs. Diane DeLue, who competed for Holland. She's American, but she competed for Holland. Christine Erath, who was East German, and myself. And the 3 of us would sort of trade places every year at the World Championships. Diane DeLue won the Worlds once. I was second. Christine was third. Then Christine won. I was second. Diane was third. So I was always second. I never made it to the 3rd spot. And then the Olympic year, I was the lucky one to win. So that was good. Thank you. And you're right. I mean, they all did probably work just as hard. I think timing had a lot to do with it. I think I was sort of ready for it that year. The other years, quite honestly, I didn't work as hard as I did the year I won. I worked hard, but not as hard. And so I think, you know, maybe they didn't work as hard the year of the Olympics or something. I don't know. I really have no idea. They were younger than I. Little Linda Fradiani, who, you know, everyone had hoped would win the Olympic gold medal in Lake Placid in 1980. She was sort of the hot, young, up-and-coming kid. She skated at nationals and skated much better than I did, and she probably should have won. But you know, I had seniority and politics of ice skating and all of that, and she didn't win. But she was a darling, darling young lady. She was really a kid. I think she was 13, maybe, just a little spitfire, doing triples. That's when the triples started. I mean, I barely knew her. And it wasn't like today where the kids skate together all the time and tour together. I, met her. That was the first time I'd ever met her at nationals. My coach was a great politician, so he did most of the work. He was good, though. He would have the judges come out, and if it was, well, Dorothy can't do school figures, he'd come out and say, no, tell me that this isn't good, and he'd show the judges that I could do them. I just got so darn nervous that when it was competition time, I completely flipped out. And when you're trying to trace these perfect circles, which are gone now today, they don't do those anymore, and you get nervous and you hyperventilate and you see your life flashing in front of you and you start shaking, you can't trace those circles. Also, I was blind. Nobody knew I couldn't see. So the year before the Olympics, I got glasses, so that helped a lot. There were all of these factors, I think, that contributed to part of my, not feeling confident and being shy. My father was in the arena. My mother was in the hotel. She wasn't a smoker, but she chain smoked that day. Well, my dad was very proud. My mom, I remember walking into the hotel room and going, and she said, so how did you do? And I said, I won. And she looked at me, startled, and said, you did? She was shocked. She never congratulated me. I think she just never thought I would do it. But my dad, of course, was very proud. And I'm sure my mother was proud. I just didn't know. I think the whole thing, finally, I guess about 4 years before the Olympics, the goal was to try and make it to the Olympics and hopefully maybe win a medal. And then all of a sudden, when that actually happens, it's disconcerting. I mean, now what? What happens now? We didn't plan for that, we planned for everything up until that moment. And then, now what? So it was an interesting time. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, and somebody spoke about this morning, was that once you achieve that lifelong goal at the age of 19, you think that everything's going to be easy. And it's only just begun. The road really had just begun. If I'd known then what I know now, well, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So, I mean, just everything from the time I turned professional and showed up for my first day of ice skating at Ice Capades. And, I had put on a few pounds, after going to the Olympics and going to Worlds. I took a vacation for the first time in my life. And I was just enjoying, winning the gold medal, and people were whining and dining me and taking me, I was agents and managers and endorsements and all that stuff. And I was just having a great time. And I put on a few pounds. I showed up at rehearsal, and one of the line skaters went over to one of his friends and said, honey, if I got to skate around her, you better call me a cab. And that was my introduction to the world of professional skating. It was entirely different than what it is today, of course. And I ended up in the hospital with a bleeding ulcer after 6 months in the ice show. I was skating 13 shows a week. I was getting up at 6 o'clock to do AM, podunk wherever we were. And the reporters saying, well, if we're not going to cover the ice show unless we can have Dorothy to interview. And here I am shy. You know, what am I going to say? I have nothing to say. I just am a dumb ice skater. If you want to ask me about ice skating, I can tell you about skating. But don't ask me about anything else, because I don't know anything else. You know, for all the hours I trained, for, you know, all the double axels I did, I didn't go to school. I didn't read. I didn't, you know, learn about anything else. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult. I was completely unhappy. You know, here's something that I loved doing. I must say I was probably burned out as well from skating. And, you know, I didn't really have a chance to enjoy my Olympic victory. I did for about a month before I had to go back and skate in the show. And it was a completely different way of ice skating. There was no training anymore. I was lucky if I got 45 minutes a day to practice. And I was away from my friends. I was, you know, every week you're in a different city, living in hotels. You know, and the other thing is I was used to getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and skating every day. And now I'm up till midnight skating ice shows. And for my whole life I had gotten up at 5. And now all of a sudden, you know, I'm trying to learn how to sleep later on the days that I don't have to do those early morning talk shows. But it just, my whole schedule, and I mean, it was just, if I'd get up in the morning to do an early show, I'd try and go home and nap in the afternoon. I could never do that. It was just changed everything that I'd ever done. Truly, professional skating is entirely different than competing, or than training and competing. And you know, in the past, there have been reporters that give professional skaters a bad rap, or they say, well, after the Olympics, they decide to do the fluffy ice shows, and it's not. It's just a different. It's a different thing. You're out there to entertain the audience. You're not out there to land all your jumps and not smile and just do these routines that are, you know, technical. They're not free and they're not fun and they're not beautiful. I mean, they are in their own way, but people criticize, well, skating's lost its grace and all of that. It hasn't. You know, if you go see those skaters skate in exhibitions, they're beautiful and they're free and they're enjoying it. But when they're in competition, it's, you know, very serious, as it should be, and technical and difficult, and that's the way it should be. I had a very tough coach in the early years. His name was Gus Lucy, and his way of complimenting you and letting you know that you were doing well was by asking you to demonstrate. He was a phenomenal technician. He could teach spins the way nobody, I mean, they don't even teach kids how to spin anymore. And he was a phenomenal jumping coach as well. So he would call me over and ask me to demonstrate. And that's how I knew that he thought I was good. Relieved that it's over. At that point, you don't even care about the numbers. You know, you hope that they're good, but at that point, it's just more of a relief. And for me, and for most of my friends, it's like, okay, well, I didn't do this right, I didn't do that right, and you're already criticizing yourself. And that's just the nature of competing with yourself, you know. Well, I still tour. Well, it's different today than it was then. In those days, we were strictly amateurs. If I'd wanted to stay in for the '80 Olympics, my parents couldn't have afforded it. They were dry. There was nothing left. My dad was so far, you know, in debt. So when I had the opportunity to turn pro, I did. And I stayed on and competed at the World Championships because I never had won a World Championships. I'd always been number 2. We try harder. So, but there really wasn't any question for me that I would turn pro. I'd done as much as I could. And so I turned professional and skated with Ice Capades. Today the kids, they make money. They're not considered professionals. They're considered Olympic eligibles. So there's never an issue whether they're going to turn pro or not, just because money when they get to that level is never an issue. They make so much money now. It was wonderful. It was very much like Norman Rockwell, small town America. I mean, we walked to school or rode our bikes, stopped at the penny candy store on the way home from school, skated on the pond. That's where I first started to skate. It was just very normal. I would go visit my grandparents or my aunt and uncle who had a big farm in Connecticut. And at that point, I didn't have my own skates. So we'd go someplace, and everybody always had old skates lying around. And I think my brother had given my cousin a pair of skates, and I'd stuffed socks in the toes because they were too big, and I'd go out and try and skate, either at my grandmother's house or at my uncle's farm. So that was really in the pond skating days. So it was before the private lessons started, or the group lessons started. Painfully shy around people I didn't know, and a bit of an imp around people I did know. I was a bratty little sister. I was the youngest of three. And I often felt as though I didn't fit in. I think my shyness had a lot to do with it. My brother was very gifted as a student. Both my brother and sister are older. And my sister was very social, and she had all the friends and boyfriends. And I just always felt stupid. As the youngest always gets the most attention, whether it's good or bad. If you do good things, you get great attention. Also, you're the youngest and the littlest and the cutest. But also, when you wanted attention, you also did some pretty rotten things. My parents they didn't have a lot of money, but we never knew that. As I look back now, they really did the best they could. My father was an engineer, and he worked for Pitney Bowes. But my brother because he was a gifted student, he was off at prep school and Ivy League colleges, and I started skating. So between my brother's school, my sister was a springboard diver, and my ice skating lessons, even though my dad, did all right, there wasn't a lot of money to go around after all of that. And my mother, she stopped working when she had my brother, and so she was a full-time mom until it got to the point where they really needed my mom to earn an income when I started getting heavily into ice skating lessons. And then she would teach, they used to call it underprivileged nursery school children. So I don't think she earned a lot of money doing that, but I think it was rewarding for her. Didn't like school at all. Partly because I wasn't very good at it. If I had a teacher that I liked, I did well. Mostly I had teachers that expected me to be brilliant like my brother, and I wasn't. Because it was such a small town. brother was smart, sister was a little less smart, and then I came along and I was the moron. Still am, but anyway, at least I found something that I can do. I hated to read. My mother could not get me to read, and I'm going through the same thing with my daughter now. I love to read now, but I don't remember reading. I loved music. I loved dance. I would sing and dance on the living room floor. That was my passion. I'd be up. I never could sleep late. I was not a sleeper. I'd be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And my dad only had Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, and Guys and Dolls, and some Burl Ives thing that he'd done for Ever Ready Batteries. I wish I could find that record today. So I knew all the words to Guys and Dolls. And Glenn Miller was good for dancing, but he wasn't really good for singing. So that's kind of what I grew up with. It was on a pond in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. And I went with my sister and my neighbor, just the three of us. Well, actually, my neighbor's mother drove us. And often my sister and my neighbor was a year older than me and a year younger than my sister, so she was right in the middle. And it was Martha and Marcia, my sister's Marcia. And they were skating backwards, and they just completely left me in the dust. And I wanted to learn how to skate backwards, and they wouldn't help me, and they went off and left me on my own. And of course, I went crying home to my mother's, up the hill with my skates on my shoulder. Mom, they won't teach me how to skate backwards. So I think I must have put on this crying thing for a long time, probably a week or so. And my mom finally said, okay, would you like to take some skating lessons? And I said, yes, I'd love to. I want to learn how to skate backwards. And that's how it started. I had some friends that actually skated before school in the mornings. And they said, take her to Playland, Rye, New York. There's a skating rink there. And sign her up for group lessons. So that's what my mom did. And I started once a week in group lessons. And after my 8 group lessons, I got a scholarship for a free private lesson, which was 15 minutes long. And it was more of a marketing tool. It was to hook you into, if you want to continue, you need private lessons. And I was hooked. I loved it. Compared to the kids today, it was late in life. Yes, it probably would be too late. But fortunately, in those days, there weren't as many skaters. And I was just driven. I was passionate. I found something that I loved. I could be all alone in the big old skating rink and nobody could get near me, and I didn't have to talk to anybody because of my shyness. It was great. I was in my fantasy world. I don't really think they saw anything in me, except the fact that I was interested in it. Where some of the other kids, they would miss a week here and miss a week there. I think they could see that I really enjoyed it. Because I wasn't particularly athletic or gifted. I was a little chubby, but I loved it. And I guess because my mom would take me to the skating rink on the weekends. This is after I'd gotten started. She'd drop me off for the first public session at 11 in the morning, and I'd stay there all day. And she'd pick me up at 5 o'clock and take me home. So I'd be at the skating rink all day long, just skating around and around. Some of those years are a little sort of muddled together for me. My mother took me to see an ice show. It was Holiday on Ice in New York City, and I think it was about 1967. It was before Peggy Fleming won the Olympics. And I think I started dreaming about competition, not knowing that I would ever do it, around 1967. And actually, that's when I was in my first competition. No, I would have been 10. Would have been 10. Yeah. That's probably when I saw my first ice show. There were very few exhibitions and no exhibitions really. Shows. There were no competitions on television. The first skating competition I ever remember seeing on television was the 1968 Olympics when Peggy Fleming won. And I'd already competed then a little bit. So there just wasn't a lot of it around. So, dreaming about competing wasn't like kids today can watch it on television. Oh, I want to do that, and didn't know there were such things as competitions. So when I really started dreaming about competing at the national level, that was almost immediately after my first competition, in my first big competition, not just a local pond, competition, which was I was probably 11. Especially in those days, you couldn't see the judges. I was this little person on the ice, and there were just people that would stand around the boards because that's what skating was all about in those days. So it could have been my mother, and it could have been judges. I didn't even know where the judges sat. It's so different now, In those days, we had to stay in school. There was not the possibility of the way kids today can not go to school and be a great ice skater and earn money at the same time as they're training for the Olympics and competing at the Olympics. For me, there was never any decision. It was just what I was going to do. I know my parents, a few times they'd say, well, if you're really serious about this, if you're really committed to this, because I knew, or I didn't know, but it was for financial reasons. And for me, there was never any question that I wouldn't do it. And I guess my parents must have seen that. And also they were probably thinking, well, what else is she going to do? But when I started getting very serious about it, I did have to have because I would travel for competitions, and I did have to go to a tutoring school at one point because I missed some school. Then my coach was in New York City, so I stayed and lived in New York City during the week, so I'd go to school in New York City. I was away from home. That started when I was about 13. It all happened very quickly. Once I got into it, it just all happened very quickly in the beginning. That's why I'm having a hard time even remembering it, because it was so long ago that it really seems as though it was another lifetime. My mother got up at 4 in the morning. I give her so much more credit today. At the time I was just a kid. Well, that's what, Mom's doing. She got up and she'd make breakfast for me and bring it up to me in bed and wake me up and lay my clothes out and help me put them on. Then she'd go warm up the car. And, in the wintertime it was freezing outside. She'd go down and start the car so I get into a warm car. I mean, she treated me like a little princess. And it was what I wanted to do. I didn't really, a couple of the kids asked me today, do you feel as though you missed out on anything in childhood because of your sacrifices? And absolutely not. I loved it. Skating was the perfect excuse not to have to go to friend's house, a friend's house for a sleepover. Not that I didn't have friends or didn't like my friends. I had a couple of very close friends, and I was always being invited to sleepovers and things. I just didn't want to go. So it was the perfect excuse. And I think a lot of that was the shyness. But my mom sacrificed. I didn't sacrifice anything. I just was passionate, It's all that passion. Well, by the time I got fairly heavily involved in competition, my brother was away he went to Exeter Academy. And so he thought it was great, he didn't care. And my sister actually liked it because she was in the teenage years. She was probably about 13. And she loved the fact that Mom wasn't there that much. She liked that. How the moms and the daughters at that age start to butt heads. They definitely butt heads, and she was happy that, you know, I had Mom with me and Mom wasn't on her case all the time. Absolutely could never have done it without my family. My father was very musical. That really was his passion, but when he grew up, you know, the oldest male child wasn't a musician. You know, they got a real job and they went to school and they got a good education. But deep down inside, his love was music. And if he could have been Betty Goodman or Glenn Miller, because he had his own band, he composed music and at Princeton in school. That was his real love. So musically, my father, you know, educated me. We would sit together and listen to records and pick music for skating programs, skating routines. And so we had a very, very close relationship there. And then he got weekend duty of driving me to the skating rink. At weekends, I think it was 5. A little later. The first competition I ever won was the second competition I ever competed in. It was in Central Park in New York. And I remember the little girls who, you know, had perfect dresses and they'd been skating for years and they all knew one another. And they were all from Long Island and Manhattan, and I was from Connecticut, and there was nobody else that I knew. And when the scores went up on the board, on the wall, they all looked at me and pointed and said, "You won," you know, and I was shocked because I wasn't as good as they were, so I don't know how I won. And I think, you know, I never liked competition, ever. It was always far too nerve-wracking. But I did well, so I guess that's why I kept doing it. And in order to get to do what I do today, I had to compete and I had to win a gold medal. I'm better in a one-on-one situation, but I still have my moments where even then, for instance, at these events, sometimes I just absolutely freeze because I'll be completely in awe of people. And in the beginning, people took it as if I was aloof or a snob or something, but I literally just would freeze. I felt I had nothing to say to anybody that anybody wanted to hear. And you know, what is so ironic is that by winning a gold medal, you're thrown into the spotlight, and having it first thing after winning a gold medal, after blood doping, there's a press conference, and all of a sudden there are swarms of reporters. And the first question the reporter that I remember somebody asking me was, "How are you going to top that?" And I thought, Jiminy Christmas. You know, a lifelong goal of mine to win an Olympic gold medal, well, lifelong, you know, I guess from the time I was 13 or something. And I actually did it, and now they're going to say, "How are you going to top that?" I don't know, and what do I say? Besides being painfully shy, I didn't even, I was stunned. It was just, whoa, is this what it's all about? It was just not at all what I expected. Oh, I take it all far too personally. I've got a much thicker skin than I used to have, but I don't take it well. Because I'm one of those people that just wants to, you know, be perfect and do everything good all the time, make everybody happy. And, you know, it's just not realistic. So. Hard work, perseverance, passion, all those words that we all talk about up there on the stage all the time. Those things are really sort of the nuts and bolts of it all. Failure, somebody was talking about, you know, don't be afraid to fail, because we all fail. And, you know, in this great game of life, you just don't know what curveball is going to be thrown your way. I mean, with all the success and all the money and all that people have that speak on the panels, everybody has problems. Everybody, you know, it's not easy. Life is not easy. When I won the Olympics, and I thought, oh gosh, now, you know, I'm going to be able to get my dad out of debt. I'm going to be able to pay for, you know, buy my mom a house, or, you know, doing all those things. Thought everything would be just rosy. And I had just started. So, you know, all those failures build character. But I will say the one thing that my mom always taught me to trust people. And I think some of the biggest problems I've gotten into is trusting people that I should never have trusted. And, you know, I guess you get a little bit cynical. You know, and I'm saying that at almost age 44, I can imagine 20. If I should live 20 years longer, you know, how much more thick my skin will be. But, you know, I was talking to, I think it was Naomi, about trusting people, and she said, well, you can't not trust people. You have to be able to trust people. And, you know, that's where I still have a hard time. You know, when do you stop trusting, or, you know, are you guarded all the time until you can put your trust? I don't know. That's a tough one. Well, I think things that are important to me, I guess having an 11-year-old daughter and seeing, I live in Baltimore now, and I live in the city. And children are very, very important. I love children. I think it's really important that we teach our children manners, kindness, just how to get along. There's so much crime. There's so much sort of ill treatment of children. It's scary. It's really scary. That's something that I think is very important because, of course, they are the future. And I mean, I think for me that's a big one.